Okay, so welcome back. This is Night Hacking at Swamp Up. My name is Yolande Poirier from Oracle Technology Network. And right now I have as a guest Jack and Alan. Hi, guys.
Hello.
So tell us what you do and who you work for.
So I work for Yahoo as a senior principal engineer. Senior principal engineer. I write lots of JNI, lots of Java, and I repackage other people's builds. So I deal with our build systems and with lots of our legacy software.
My name is Jack Weaver. I'm a tech lead at SADA Systems. So I oversee a group of 5 engineers. We build SaaS multi-tenant software. Company's new at software development, so there's been a lot of growth at that organization, both in DevOps maturity, testing, kind of raising the bar in terms of quality. And I've been trying to help bring that change about. So I used to work with Alan at Yahoo, and that's how we know each other.
Okay, and the size of your company?
Yeah, I have about 150 employees total, maybe 25 or so in actual development, and then there's 3 products. And on my product, I've got the 5 engineers or the 5 developers and myself. So a team of 6, and we do it all.
Awesome. So really like a big company and then a very small startup type of company. So both of you actually did a talk today about the DevOps for-me model. And so what was the topic, really, the main topic?
So the idea was after Jack went to a startup, we started talking about how, all the cool tools we have at Yahoo for doing DevOps and how we missed them all dramatically.
Yeah, basically, when I first joined at SADA, it was quite a shock. The existing engineers had never really been through automation or heavy levels of testing or process that kind of takes their commit and just goes and deploys it out. They'd never seen any of that before. And when I got there, I came from a dev tools team at Yahoo working with Alan, and it was shock. Okay, so. The idea was, build small, start in terms of what is the highest ROI for your team. Everything we do in software is an economic activity. And I can't invest a lot of time in building, massive systems like Yahoo has, but I still need that DevOps experience. I still have to push code. I still got to run fast. How do I do that? And there's a lot of lessons learned when you go through that kind of experience, coming from a big, organization like Yahoo and then being put into a really small company with no experience. And still having to raise those quality standards, get to production faster, deploy code faster, follow best practices. And it's been quite a ride. We've matured a lot. To look at when I first started to where we're now, phenomenal. I couldn't be more proud. I have great engineers. I love my team. It's been a heck of a ride. Yeah.
So what are some of the I would say like the practices that both of you agreed on? Like whatever is applicable, or what is the if you want another way of looking at it, what would be like the core practices that you want to have, like no matter whether you're working in a big company or a small company?
So the automatic CI was one of the core practices, and the whole goal here was, I've been to this conference before, and I realized all the big companies are here saying, this is how we do it. But if you're a small company, there wasn't anything for you to take home and use, because I've got 60, 80 engineers doing build tools. He's got none. And so we wanted to show something where you can take all the same core principles of commit to production without humans involved, automatic deployments, and say, you know what, any person, any single small startup engineer can do this. It's not just something the big companies can do, but you can do it too with the tools that are provided.
Yeah, and when you come to an organization that hasn't really seen or experienced a lot of this before, you start on the small things and you whittle away and you work on them, and you turn people that might not have seen it or might not have believed in the process before, you turn them into believers. So you start small. You say, okay, we're going to focus on tests. We're going to focus on unit tests. Okay, now we're going to hook up a CI system, and we're just going to build. We're not even going to publish or package or anything like that. We're just going to build it, okay, and make sure it passes. And then you build on that, and you say, okay, well, now it makes sense for us to actually publish our artifacts because we need something to be able to push out. We're tired of doing deployments from dev laptops. And so now you start publishing. We use Artifactory. We push our artifacts out there. And then after you've got that in place, now you can automate your deployment. Because now your CI machines can actually pull the artifacts from Artifactory that have already been through some level of QA and testing and push them out into your environment. So the trick, if there's kind of a couple takeaways. One, sort of universal practices: unit testing, functional testing, packaging, versioning, tagging, deploying. Those are the basic things. You done at Yahoo, still done at a really small company. And two, for the small companies that are really challenged in terms of getting to that environment, the best level or the best advice I could possibly give is you start small and you convince those around you about the ROI. Because everything we do is an economic activity. We have to pay for that time. So you have to convince your bosses and your superiors that it's worth it. You have to be able to show how it speeds development up and how you save time. And when they start seeing it as an ROI, as an investment, you start converting people. They become believers.
So one more thing to remember is, although it may not seem like it, Yahoo is also new at this. We started the automatic commit to production within the past 5 years, probably the past 3. Our automatic deployment goals have all been pushed for the past couple of years. It's not like we've been doing this for the past 10 years I've been there, but it's been probably past 3 to 5 years that we really started focusing on, let's automate this stuff, let's get it out, let's get everyone doing things the same way, let's get everyone doing code reviews. So it's actually as new to us as it is to many of these startups, although it may not seem like it.
So this is really good analogy. It's wonderful. So what are some of the tools that you use? I mean, do you have like different tools because of the size of the company, or what is affordable for a smaller size? Or
so that's one of the most interesting points. So I use Artifactory hosted internally. He uses Artifactory software as a service. It's actually the same tool. Just one person maintains it instead of my team of people. Yahoo actually we used Jenkins heavily. We decided that wasn't cutting it. We built an internal system called Screwdriver. It went to Screwdriver v2. It went to v3. Now they've open sourced it as screwdriver.cd, which other people use if that's what they want to use. We use GitHub internally. Once again, we host GitHub. They use private GitHub. Kubernetes, Google Cloud. We have internal private clouds. That's one of the things we don't leverage open source for, but in some areas we do use some public cloud providers.
Yeah, and ultimately, the interesting kind of difference is, with Yahoo, there's larger risk if a system goes down. They lose hundreds of thousands of dollars an hour. We're not quite at that level. So the economics are not in our favor to build up big internal systems that might be more reliable than the public cloud ones. The economics aren't there. It doesn't make sense, right? We're small. We have 1 or 2 customers. We're not big yet. As time goes on, the economics will shift, and we will change from an organization that relies a lot in terms of the public cloud SaaS tooling to a little bit more private cloud, to maybe some internal run systems as we get real big, right? And so what you see is, going back to sort of ROI and economics and the way of thinking about development and DevOps, is you're going to place your effort and your time and your chips, if you will. You're going to place your money in the things that are the biggest payoff. And initially, we can stomach that level of risk with public cloud. At some point, we're not going to be able to. And when we do, we might shift more in terms of Yahoo model and actually have larger systems that are internal, and that we might have staffed up teams to run them. But today, when you're just getting started, the economics don't make sense. So, we use Travis CI, but any of the CIs out there, Circle or Semaphore or Drone, I've looked and evaluated a lot of them. They're all really good. We use GitHub Private, so not quite the big, large hosted GitHub that Yahoo has. We have Artifactory SaaS. It's real cheap, $85 a month, and we get our own Artifactory just like Yahoo has. And then we have a couple of other services we use. So there's a static analysis tool called Codacy that actually, on pull requests, it can review your code and try to catch errors and bugs. That helps put a little bit of guardrails in place in terms of quality, lint checks, things like that. And then, of course, we're a big Google Cloud shop, so the whole stack's on GCP. We have Kubernetes on Container Engine, a few different GCE instances in terms of VMs, but it's all SaaS, So there is some risk there. If those guys go down, we go down with them. But again, the economics don't point in terms of taking the Yahoo model yet, because we're just so small.
Well, at the same time, recently we've switched to when we go down, we serve from public cloud as a failsafe. So it's interesting that you can leverage both sides of it. You can run your private cloud, but then you can also say, hey, you know what? When my data center goes down, I can serve static assets out of a public cloud for BCP backups or for spikes.
So in the DevOps environment, I always hear about the change of cultures, right? That you need, of course, I mean, we all are trained to do like routine, or we have our ways of doing things. So do you have like any advice on how to change that culture and how to introduce DevOps if a team is not doing it today?
So the biggest culture shock we went through at Yahoo was eliminating the QA department. That was a shock. Now, to change the culture, the best way to change an engineer's mind is to show him it makes his life easier. If I have to spend 3 hours goofing off waiting for a build, my life is miserable. If I can cut that 3 hours down to 1, I'm much happier. So if you show them things that give them return on investment to where it's easier to debug, it's easier to build, there's less to monkey with, it's easier to figure out why it's broken, they're going to transparently just change because it's easier.
Yeah, culture is a tough one. I think the biggest takeaways you have is, at least coming from a small perspective, you know, I'm a new employee there. I come with a pretty good amount of good experience and best practices, you know, taking a lot from Yahoo. You have to find individuals that are either on the fence, right, or they're hard line against you, one or the other, and they're both useful individuals to find. Because if you find the hardliners, you can single them out, you can sit them down, you can over time work on them, and when those guys who are usually the loud, you know, anti-whatever it is, okay, anti-DevOps, anything, once they start to change, it changes other individuals around them, right? So you take the loud ones out. If you can do that, you're off to a good start. And then the guys that are on the fence, you know, they're usually easier to convince. At the end of the day, you know, money talks. And if you can sit down, you can actually show how it is an ROI, how there's a return on that investment, right? And you can show how it's saving your time, and it's allowing you to catch bugs sooner. It's allowing you to release faster, produce more higher quality code. If you can show those things, you'll find a lot of the business professionals that aren't necessarily day-to-day engineers are all of a sudden in promoting what you want to do. And when you convince them, it can actually fall down. But culture's a tough one. You have to kind of, you know, slowly but methodically target people and try to convince them. And I think of it like turning a big battleship. You know, culture doesn't change on a dime. And so you make the proper changes, and slowly over time you start to change the direction of the company.
I'd say an oil tanker. But the crispy barnacles, the old guys have been there for 10 years. The way you change them is you make their life easier. And you make it easier by showing them how things can be faster by them doing less.
Okay, cool. Any other takeaway things from your experience or from your presentation that you would like to share? Or did we cover everything?
I mean, there's quite a bit there. I think at the end of the day, you do what makes sense, right? There is no black and white in this. There's universal practices that are pretty well established. Follow those. Beyond that, you're going to do what makes sense for your organization. And, you know, always have internalize the fact that programming is an economic activity. And whether you're spending time working on DevOps and building like CI pipelines, or you know, infrastructure as code, and kind of grabbing old machines that were, you know, snowflakes and turning them into machines that are configured and described in code, right? That takes time. So pick the small things, you know, and do what makes sense.
I have to say that differently. Pick the biggest, gnarliest, ugliest thing you can find in the organization and fight with it for 5 years until you win. I had an issue with the operating system we're running, and well, a good 5.5 years later, we're not running that operating system anymore. And when it's time to move to the next one, we're moving a little bit faster than the last time. But it's a lot easier this time.
That's so much like a big corporation talk. I can relate. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for spending the time and talking to us. So thank you for sharing your knowledge.